Cool. Okay. So this class is on the BINSR and inspection period, and really the importance of this is just to communicate the essence of this process. I see a lot of BINSRs, both not only on listings, but your guys' ones you draft and so forth. And I see a lot of common kind of mistakes and misconceptions about the process, best practices, and so forth. So the purpose of this class is to flush out some of that. So please, any questions, just stop me and ask, because I want to make sure that we address everything that you got in regards to this entire process. Sound good? Okay. First thing I have is a question for you all. It's more rhetorical. When's the last time you actually read a BINSR? Like what it says. Yeah, it's been a while probably. And I asked that because so many agents like knew what a form said the first time they filled one out and then haven't read it since, and it could be many years. So every once in a while you may want to go back and just reread what you think you already know, because that's how you tend to learn new things.
And I imagine you mean that from the very
Yes, yeah. So let's get into that a little bit. So the main thing that I want you guys to understand the process of this, like to get started, is get rid of the idea of an inspection period. The contract calls it a due diligence period. So what does that mean to you?
That means that you have an opportunity to inspect everything that you have any concerns about prior to going into a full contract.
Yes, anything and everything. You've got a window of time, buyer, that you are to investigate anything that is a material matter to you. Material matter meaning important, or could affect your decision making, right? So that's really what you've got to educate and instill into your client, is that this window is for you to think about everything. So the buyer advisory, what resources are in there? What is important to you? What kind of research do you want to do? It's more than just inspecting the home. Are you with me? Okay. Now, we get lost in paying attention to those kind of details because our typical transaction is home inspection, get in, get out, move on, right? But what if this was a fourplex? What do you want to investigate? Rent rolls? Yeah. Like maybe actually there were tax returns on it? Like what's real? What else? Utilities? Yeah. Because on the tax returns you're going to claim every penny you spent, right? On any and all utilities or expenses. So that's going to show you the real accounting, unless they've increased it, but they're not going to. I mean, I don't know anyone that's going to lie on their taxes by the way of not claiming expenses.
Right.
So you're gonna basically declare more income than what you actually made on your taxes. Why would you do that, right? So unless they're adding BS type expenses, like you're going to get a pretty accurate accounting, right? So if it was managed, if that fourplex was managed by a property management company, what else would you want to know?
The rents were paid on time.
Yeah, when are rents paid? Who's kind of an offender or repeat offender on late payments? Yeah.
The
What else?
management contract.
Huh?
The management contract.
Yes. Yeah. What else?
Total operating expenses.
Yeah, the full out accounting, right? What else would you want to verify?
Vacancy rate.
Vacancy rate? Yeah, you could probably see that on the rent rolls and all of that. Yeah, want to verify. What else?
Securities. They're being low.
Okay. Yeah. What else? What's the most important thing you want to? Evictions. How about the leases?
Look at them. Read the leases.
Yeah, read them. Are they expired? You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't you want to investigate everything?
And like a rental survey, because you don't know if they're in line with the rest of the neighborhood. Maybe there's an upside
Totally.
for the future.
Yeah. So are they paying market rate rents? Like, you want to fully investigate everything before you commit to buying it, right? So that's your due diligence. And really, a house is no different. Like, before you do a home inspection, what do you want to know from the seller? Spuds. I think that's one of the biggest things that are so widely overlooked. Spuds and what else?
Insurance.
Insurance history.
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, you want those two items before your home inspection. Why?
It gives you information, history of when they lived there.
Yeah.
Because if
Well,
the
what if
house
there's
isn't
something
able to be insured, then why are you gonna continue with the
Or if it's
process?
expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
And for example, if the SPUD says nothing about AC, furnace, or roof, then, and you see the age of it, then you can determine whether you're gonna want additional inspectors to line up to make sure that you get everything looked at that's important. Or
Totally.
an old neighborhood where you want a sewer scope.
Yeah.
Or along with the age of the property, the roof, and they, oh no, we haven't had any problem, and then you get the
Your inspection shows
insurance,
that there's,
and it says, yeah. we paid
Repairs and all kinds of
10,000,
things, right?
yeah,
So with the disclosure on the SPUDs may prompt your home inspector, you telling them, hey, can you pay extra close attention to this and let me know if there's anything shady going on, or if we should get a professional just for that, like HVAC, roof, something of that nature, for an additional investigation. But you just go there like, oh, I'm happy to have a deal in escrow, let's do a home inspection and hopefully everything's good to go. Like,
the first one was like that.
yeah.
First 10.
Should I print BINSR or would this be like
Okay, so your due diligence period is a time frame for the buyer to conduct all material inspections, right, to satisfy their peace of mind. As soon as you get a contract accepted, schedule the home inspection and what other inspection? Termite. Immediately. Immediately. So many agents wait a couple days, then schedule it, and when you schedule it takes a couple days, and now you're doing your inspection on like day 8 of 10. Why is that a bad idea?
Because there might be something really big that you want to know about, and you need another inspection.
Yeah, you may have to go get a professional for this specific item, and they're a couple days out. And now you're gonna have to ask for an extension on your due diligence period, and they may say no. So the quicker you get that puppy scheduled, the better. So as soon as you get contract acceptance, if the SPUDs include or not in the doc tab, you better request them pretty quick. Because how long do they have to get you SPUDs?
Yes, 3 days.
3 days. How long for clue?
Same.
I think it's 5.
Yes, that's
It's 5.
right, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, ask your broker.
Hey, Broker, how many days?
And it's in the contract too.
I thought it was 3 for both.
Okay.
Contract.
But it's in it.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked about this in some other classes too. Like, don't overlook the home insurance. So many agents don't even advise their client, hey, by the way, do you have an insurance agent? Oh no, I go through Geico. Okay, well you better get on the phone quickly and call them to make sure 2 things. What 2 things are we investigating?
Insurable
Insurability of
cost.
the property
property.
and insurability of
The house?
the buyer.
Oh.
I'm pointing to myself, but I'm not buying.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Make sure your buyer can get insurance. Because some people have a history of certain activities and things.
Ah,
Yeah, so insurability of the property and your client. I've told you this story before. I had a deal in escrow. We just could not get the insurance claims history. Sellers dragging their feet, dragging their feet, dragging their feet. Same with the SPUDs. And so we did the inspection. Turned out this property had 3 major claims, like high dollar things. So when we went to get insurance on the property during the inspection period, you know how much is insurance on a property? On an average home? $700-800,
Yeah.
under 1,000?
Yeah.
yeah.
This one was well over $2,500 a year. In fact, because her monthly payment for insurance would have came out to like $257. It actually was like $3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now what just happened to her DTI ratio?
Oh my gosh.
And she no longer qualified for the house based on how much it cost to insure the property. Now what if we would have known that before spending the money for a home inspection?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, who's responsible for that?
Be me as the agent to inform them.
My client. Me. Right?
Yeah.
This was a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, but really technically, I mean, it is up to them, but yes, it is a responsibility to.
So by the way, do you have an insurance agent that you refer people to?
Yes.
you might want to get one.
Yes.
And givers gain, so the more people you send this that you know, like, and trust, they may end up sending some business to you. Ta-da! But that's not the reason you do this. The reason you do it is to be, like, you know, follow through with your fiduciary duties. Advise, promote, protect your client's best interests. Make sure they can get insurance on this property on themselves, right, before they spend several $100s for a home inspection.
So just thinking about that, if you're like pulling teeth trying to get like the BINSR or like the spuds and the insurance claims, like could that potentially be a red flag? Like
It could be,
it could be, or
but here's the deal. So let's say that you're not getting a clue report because the seller's deceased, the estate has no idea, blah, 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 blah. You don't even have to have that. Because every time somebody goes to get an insurance policy on a property, there's a national database that collects everything. So if there's ever been a claim on that person or that property, it'll be in that database.
okay.
That's how all these different insurance agencies do underwriting and to issue a policy.
Gotcha.
There's got to be a national database. So it's there. So if you're not even getting a clue, you can call your insurance agent. When they go to issue a policy and they do an underwriting, they're going to look at that database and pull all of that. So you don't have to wait to get the clue to do this. Okay? Any questions on that? Good. All right. Let's see. So when the inspection's done and you go to write a BINSR, in your notes I made this bold for you with little stars on it, to pay attention. And it says, educate your buyer. The BINSR is not a wish list.
That's right.
No. And you guys, you know, this is going to become abundantly obvious right here, right now in this market, right? You submit a BINSR, and this happens, guys. Either the agent writes out everything, or the inspection summary is so long, they say, see Exhibit A, fix it all. That's not what this is for. Here's what I advise my clients. Before we do an inspection, like at the buyer consult, and then while we're looking at the house, and then when we write the offer, and then after all inspections are done. I say the same thing every single time because I'm getting it through to them. We are going to ask for items that are so important to you that if they say no, we're canceling the contract. These are deal breakers. These are big ticket items. We are not going to ask for cosmetic things in nature, like the doorbell is missing a screw, the cabinet hardware is wobbly, there's uneven paint on the trim. We're not asking for that. Are you with me?
Yep.
This is not a wish list of, I found all this stuff, go fix it all. You're not buying a new home. This isn't custom built for you. It's used. Expect to see some of those things. But we will ask them for everything that is reasonable and prudent. Oh, okay, that makes sense. What's your definition of reasonable and prudent?
Maybe an AC unit.
Yeah,
That's pretty reasonable here.
exactly. Right? Yeah, very reasonable.
200.
So I have it on here. Basically, where are my notes? Let's see. Yeah. So the main purpose of the list of items that you're going to ask for is to communicate to the seller that the seller is unwilling to correct the items requested, the buyer would want to cancel and find another property. Secondarily, let's say there's no deal breakers. AC's working. However, there's some items that are reasonable and prudent. So reasonable and prudent would be something that it's broken, inoperable, or simply it's not functioning as intended. You with me? I mean, let's say a hot water heater. Let's say it's working, it's hot, but it's not as hot as it should be. And it's 10 years old. And, you know, if it stopped working, the whole thing may not need to be replaced. Maybe it's just an element, right? So if you're looking at things and it's just not working the way it's supposed to be working, it would be reasonable to say, hey, this needs some service. Are you with me? Okay. But again, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if it's still working, it's just not working as intended, is it a deal breaker to you? Because don't you want to know up front? That way when you're going back and forth with the listing agent, you have a little bit of freedom to negotiate some of that, yes? Okay. I don't like dropping bombs on my client, like, here's a bombshell of information, now you must make a life-altering choice, yes or no. Like, nobody likes to be put in that position. Am I communicating?
Yeah.
So you're softening blows here by being mindful and giving them perspective. And the more of those conversations you have, the more understanding you have with each other, you and your client, yes? The more you can go speak with the listing agent and work out some solutions to bring back to your client. Does that make sense?
I just went through this on a BINSR
Okay.
in the last couple of days. So the house was built in 97? No. Anyway.
2 or 3 years?
Yeah, a while ago. And so we already had, question about the roof, because even if it's not leaking, the underlayment, it's a tile roof. So we had that question, got the clue. They said they did some roof replacement. I was able to clarify that. We did our inspection. My client is super reasonable and really educated, because this is the second house that I've worked with her on. We had a roof inspection. It is not leaking, but it is getting to the point where the underlayment's about gone. So we had this conversation, I don't expect him to put a new roof on. I know I'm buying a used house. It's not currently leaking, so you can't say, gotta replace. It's not leaking. It's just old and
It's at the end of its lifespan.
life. So
Yeah.
we ended up, I called the listing agent, we talked about it, and we came up with a really good compromise of a third of the cost of new. And that way she now is starting to budget, because the roofer told her probably 2 years, 3 years. Seller's happy because we didn't ask them for
A new roof.
$9,500.
Yeah.
And actually, the more serious thing was the fact that a bunch of the windows didn't operate correctly. That was, the roof was not near as scary as, say, being in a bedroom and being trapped because you can't get the window open. So, $500 in roof or in window repairs was way more important than the roof.
Yeah.
And she told me what her bottom line was, so that when I'm talking to the listing agent, we came in at 45 and they came back at 3, I already knew that that was acceptable to her. So we had already thought it out before
Yeah.
I started talking.
Perfect. Yep. Absolutely. Thank
And
you for
everything's
that.
signed and done.
Congratulations. Okay, so let's talk about drafting a BINSR. Here's, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, when you submit your BINSR, do you get another shot? No. Once you send this bad boy over, you're done. So, you might want to clearly communicate your intention, yeah? So, is they'll say, like, as an example here, item 1702.2. And they just list all the item numbers from the inspection summary. Okay, so now you're saying your notice is all those items. But what are you really stating? Nothing.
Just rewriting.
Nothing. It's a statement. It's not a request. Like, what are they supposed to do with that?
Read it and get angry.
Besides get angry.
Right.
Yeah. So, if it says, let's do an example here. So item arbitrary 1702.2 is there's several broken or slipped roof tiles, and some agents will just put that item on there. Okay, but you're not asking for anything. You're stating there's several broken or slipped roof tiles, but you didn't ask for anything, right? Okay. So what you would want to do is still reference that item in the inspection, because you're going to attach that with your BINSR as a point of reference for them to get more information. But what are you asking?
Fix it.
So the two words I want you guys to tattoo on your forehead or your forearm, I don't know. Repair/replace. Those are two different things, aren't they?
There.
Repair is different than replace. So when you're having a conversation with your client about the thing that's inoperable or not working as intended, what are we asking for? Are you okay with this being repaired? Or must it be replaced? Or you don't care, so long as it's fixed. So for example, on broken or slipped roof tiles, could you say, Item 1702.2. Seller to repair or replace and correct all broken or slipped roof tiles. Is that a request? Is it specific?
Yes,
Is it also a little bit vague to give the seller some leniency?
yes.
Like if I get a chipped roof tile, a concrete one, can they glue it back together
Sure.
with the appropriate epoxy from a roofer and all this? Or does it have to be replaced? So if you give them some leniency to do what's reasonable and prudent, are you still going to get to the end result? And it might save the seller a little bit of money and the buyer's still happy. Are you with me?
Yeah, I think the same thing is using a licensed or unlicensed person to complete the job as well, right? So
Depends.
Yeah,
that
that's
depends on what item you want to request, on which one you want to put in there, right?
Workmanlike. In a
So here's the deal.
workmanlike manner.
When I'm a listing agent and I get a BINSR
Yeah,
requesting that X, Y, and Z is to be done by a licensed professional, I always just giggle inside like, that's cute.
Yeah.
Because it states in the contract and here that it's to be done in a workman-like manner. The seller can literally do all of this unless that thing required a permit or something of that nature. But let me ask you, do you guys know what roofing activity requires a roofing license? Because there's only one.
in addition,
Maybe
Isn't it
Put it on
the
brand new?
installation
right.
Yeah.
of concrete tile roof requires a license. The installation, not repair or maintenance. So when they say it's 3-tab shingle, and they're like, you know, some of those, what do they call it? It's that row of the 3-tab
Yeah.
to be replaced by a licensed roofer. Why? Now, I would recommend it, right, if possible, but is it required or can you enforce that?
No.
No.
It just, when people say that, that just means that now I have to rewrite their BINSR, and I'm definitely not gonna rewrite every item.
I don't even address and say that we're not gonna have it done by, I say seller to correct.
Um, Well, yeah, but you still have to rewrite the verbiage. If they were willing to do all those things, but they said license, now I have to rewrite it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. If you just say that the seller's gonna correct it,
Right, but I have to say that.
Yeah.
I have to say what the seller's gonna do since they said something different.
yeah, I know this is being videoed, but even at that, if we check the box, the seller's gonna correct it, again, it states that it has to be done in a workman-like manner. I
Yeah.
didn't necessarily agree that it be done by a licensed. But you'll get some kickback on that.
Yeah, because they're gonna be
Exactly.
like, well, this doesn't say, so
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather write and be safe,
Yes.
but
That
it's
is
still a pain in the ass.
the cleanest and best policy, is
Yes.
to rewrite.
Yes.
But you don't have to say which ones will and will not be done. If you just state, seller shall correct, or seller will repair, or seller will replace. If you're not sure if we're gonna repair or replace, seller shall correct. Item number, da-da-da-da. Are you with me? So your verbiage matters on this. Pay attention to what am I actually communicating with these words? What does that mean? That's the biggest mistake I see agents make. You're not actually clear on what you're asking for, or you've pigeonholed yourself into only one solution. Are you with me? The next biggest pet peeve that I see is when you get the BINSR. I mean, none of you do this, but it'll say, per item 1802.5, pool equipment's not operating properly, seller to investigate and repair as necessary. What? You want the seller to investigate something? I'm confused. No. It's not the seller's responsibility to investigate anything until you've made a specific request or demand. But having the seller do something that's due diligence is no. No, we will not do that. If it was important to the buyer, they should have investigated it.
And the same with the air conditioning.
Yep.
I have the same thing with that. Where the home inspector, he's not an air conditioning specialist, it's not coming up to a certain degree, and, you know, they'll say, you need an air conditioning specialist. That's when I ask, okay, do you want an air conditioning specialist? Because this is your due diligence time, you need to be responsible.
Now, if you know the split's off and it's not within the acceptable tolerance, you can have an AC person come out. Or you can say, the system is not operating as intended. The seller is to have it seen and serviced.
So that the splits are within range. And I put that
Thank
and
you.
ended up with a brand new AC because they couldn't get the old one to get into the splits.
Yeah.
It was
What-
$8,000 AC.
Yeah, because what are you asking for? You're asking
What do you
for it
want
to
to
have an
happen?
acceptable split.
Exactly.
So seller to have it seen and serviced to accomplish what? Are you with me? So that's the biggest thing. Because yeah, we don't know what the problem is. So we can have someone come out and tell us what it is, or we can just say it's not working, and this is the desired end result. Seller, go make that happen. Now, that's why when you submit a BINSR, how long does the seller have to respond? Why?
Because they may have to go get inspections or
Estimates.
bids or estimates.
They may have to say,
or-
oh, well, how much is it going to cost me to approve that repair?
Exactly.
I may want to do my due diligence and get a couple bids. Because if it's going to be a whole new AC unit, maybe I say no as the seller, right? So it's not that the seller won't have to investigate anything. What I am saying is, it's not their job to go investigate what the problem is per se. Unless you're saying specifically, this isn't function properly, this is what will be proper, and we want it to do that. Now you got to go figure it out. But to say that, hey, something's wrong over here, we don't know what the problem is, but good luck. Take it. Okay. Talked about repair, replace. So let's talk about where you find a whole bunch of stuff wrong with the property, and maybe you already know the seller situation where it's in a state selling the property, and the heirs don't want to squabble and go get a handyman and do all this stuff. So they want to just give you a credit. Or maybe your buyer just wants a credit because they're handy themselves. So, how do you handle this?
Not
Huh?
Two parts.
Two parts. Let's hear it.
So first thing you do is determine what your buyer wants.
Yep.
And then the second, well, the number two is to call the listing agent and talk it out.
Always communicate with the listing
Explain
agent.
what it is that they want and see what that, take the temperature of how they're gonna
Like
come
that.
back.
Take the temperature.
Because
yeah.
you can tell right away, if, oh yeah, let me talk to my client, or, oh, my client, you know. You can
Yeah.
immediately feel what kind of headspace they're in, and that's exactly what I did with the BINSR I just finished.
Because here's the deal. As a dominant listing agent, when I get a BINSR and there's a bunch of stuff on there, I am always pro, give them money to go away. Always, if possible. Because when you start getting into things, like, oh, that's going to be $150. And then they tear into it, it's like, oh, now it's going to be $1,500. Right? And then the deal falls apart, now what does the seller have to do for the next buyer? Disclose. Like you can open up Pandora's box with some things. Yeah?
Also, sometimes there's timing. Like
Totally.
windows or things that you have
Roofers
to
are even
order.
hard right now.
Yeah, and then it puts them under pressure to get it done.
Yes and no. So, have you read the contract?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they can do the work after the
100
purchase.
Just had this
Whatever it
situation
is.
with an escrow. So, lack of communication, the termite treatment was not done in time. So, when there's an item buyer and seller agreed upon, the seller's going to correct. How long does the seller have to get that item done? Hmm?
180 days?
I think you're right. I think it's 180.
150 days
50.
following close of escrow. So long as all work, materials, everything has been paid for by close of escrow.
And is that money held in the escrow account?
No.
No, it's not.
So the best way to do that, that's a good question. The best way to do that is to get the invoice from that person, submit it to title. Now it's a line item on the settlement statement, and the contractor, the vendor, gets paid through closing out of the seller's proceeds.
Okay.
Now you have documentation that's paid for.
I had an interesting situation where it was the one I was just telling you about in the hall. We submitted a BINSR. The owner, the seller, is an ex-agent and decided he wasn't going to correct anything on the BINSR because one, he found out that we got his house for $40,000 less than the homes that were selling in the neighborhood. He was like, no, hoping that perhaps we would fall out so he can again
more money.
release it and go back onto the market and get more out of it. So I had a conversation with my buyers about it, and then with the agent, and they agreed that timing and everything, again, they go, well, we'll give you $1,000 instead to do these repairs. And I told my buyers that here's, I think, why they're wanting to get out of it. And they go, he's not gonna get out of it. We'll take the $1,000.
Yeah.
So that was a situation with that too. So they got a house that they can move into that probably is gonna give them some immediate equity into the home. And they get the home that they wanted to in the neighborhood that they wanted to.
Exactly. So giving your client perspective, because some buyers could look at it and go, no, these things are wrong. If they don't fix them, we're canceling.
Right.
Okay, so you're going to walk out of potentially $40,000 in equity through principal?
Right.
Like, you must be a special kind of stupid.
Right.
Just being real. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so BINSR credit in lieu of repairs. So here's the deal. You still, the BINSR doesn't say, here's your buyer's options. Premises accepted, no corrections requested, buyer accepts the premises in its present condition and no correction or repairs are requested. Number 2, premises rejected, buyer disapproves of the items listed below and elects to immediately cancel the contract. So by the way, if you're using the BINSR to cancel a deal, and you just check that box, it says buyer disapproves of the items listed below, which means you don't leave it blank. Are you with me? Okay, I'm just reading verbatim. Option number 3, buyer elects to provide seller an opportunity to correct the disapproved items listed below. So even if you're willing to settle for a $1,000 credit, you would still list all the items that you're intending to use that credit for.
Yeah.
Got it?
And then you're at an addendum for that.
Then you write a separate addendum to say, seller to credit buyer $1,000 towards buyer's settlement costs. You don't say anything about repairs.
Yep.
Here's why. Addendums are what?
Part of the contract.
Part of the contract.
Yeah.
Did you know the BINSR is not? The BINSR is not part of the contract. So if you want to change a term or condition of the contract, you must use an addendum. Now, when you use an addendum to change a term of the contract, who gets to see that?
The lender.
The lender. Who else?
Title.
Title. Right. All parties involved. So an underwriter gets your contract and goes, oh, $5,000 for repairs. What repairs?
Yeah.
Right.
Show me the inspection.
Right.
You are likely screwed now. Because they'll say, we're not loaning until those things are done. And what if the seller has no money to do it?
No deal.
No deal. Dead. So, never state credit in lieu of repairs unless it's a cash transaction. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to have your BINSR with all those items and an addendum. Don't submit the BINSR until you submit the addendum and get an approval on the addendum. If you don't get approval on the addendum, the seller won't sign it, you can use the BINSR to cancel. Now, if you've talked this through, everyone's on the same page and nothing's been submitted yet, feel free to submit both at the same time. Because the seller goes, no, you know what, I don't want to get the credit, I'll fix everything. Is that acceptable to your buyer? So buyer, did you want the money or did you want everything taken care of? See what I'm saying? Because now we don't give a damn which one they sign. We're getting what we want. Yeah.
I have a question. So in that case, if you submit the addendum and they sign it, you're really not asking them anymore to make repairs. Can you just mark the BINSR that the premises are accepted once you, okay, because
Yes.
I wanted to make sure that that was good because that's what I did.
Yeah.
Because we're no longer asking for
Yeah.
anything. You gave us a credit, that's all we
Totally.
care about, this is good.
I hope that Mike
The seller
picked up on
wouldn't-
that.
wouldn't-
That's good.
So here's the deal. Let's say you already drafted it to ask the seller to fix everything because you were not sure if they were going to sign the addendum, right? The seller signs the addendum. Then the seller can just come back and say, we're not fixing that stuff.
Yeah, they-
Right.
But they still sign that, the BINSR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I see a lot of time to renegotiate now that we've done an inspection. The buyer has more information and maybe their opinion about the property's changed and they want to renegotiate. You can do that. But the BINSR is not the appropriate channel to renegotiate terms and conditions of the contract because the BINSR is not part of the contract. Got it? Now, another problem I see is that agents will submit a BINSR and then an addendum to reduce the price or ask for credit or something of that nature. The seller doesn't have to sign that. Like, you really could just put your buyer in a position, now they're not going to get anything, and the seller can cancel the contract, or the seller can respond in a way that the buyer would want to cancel because the seller wants to put it back on the market.
Yeah.
Especially in a market like this, where values are going up almost daily. And trust me, this was a massive problem in 2005. Because there were days, literally, where houses were worth $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 more in a day. So we're like, as a listing agent, waiting for the BINSR, because we're going to say, we want you to cancel, and we'll do anything to get you to cancel. That's not good. So if you understand this process and how it works, you can have a better opportunity, a better chance to help your buyer win. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, best policy, submit the addendum for signature, then the BINSR, because the BINSR is your ace in the hole to cancel if you're not able to come to an agreement. Okay? Okay. Any questions on that part?
Yeah, I do have a question on it.
Okay.
Because the addendum is asking for money in repairs, in lieu of repairs, but not really.
Not in those words, but yes.
Not in those words.
Yeah.
But as a buyer, my understanding was you couldn't ask for money. It had to be something that was offered to you because the seller didn't want to do the repair, so that they would offer, hey, we'd rather give you money, and that was the correct pattern of what you need to go to as far as giving money.
Yeah, there's no validity to that whatsoever.
Okay,
None.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
You just can't ask for money on the BINSR, correct?
Yeah, I mean, technically I suppose you could, but again, no one's seeing that. It's not part of the contract. So let's talk about that. Because some agents will just say on the BINSR, like, seller to credit buyer, $1,500 in lieu of repairs, right? Well, if the seller doesn't want to do that and they say no, now what's your buyer's two options?
Cancel or accept.
Cancel it or accept that response, right? Like, you really have no leverage. And even if the seller agreed to that, you still got to do an addendum because nobody knows of that term. This doesn't go, the BINSR doesn't go to the escrow officer. It's not a term or condition of the contract. So if you put it on BINSR, you still got to do an addendum anyways. So you might as well do it properly, put it on addendum, send that over and say, hey, listen, if we don't get this, we're going to cancel with the BINSR. Or we're going to give you the BINSR with all those repairs on it and we're not willing to accept no as an answer. So who's in a better negotiating position? I am. I'm holding the cards. That make sense?
What was the verbiage again? That you put on the addendum where you don't put like credit in lieu of whatever?
Yeah, it's in the notes.
Is it on there?
Yeah, seller to credit buyer X amount of dollars. Now it also states in here in the notes, what if you're already getting a credit from the seller before the BINSR?
An additional,
Yeah.
and sometimes an additional two total.
Yes, thank you. So it's in the notes here. So to say seller to credit buyer an additional $1,500 for a total of what you already asked for plus $1,500. Ladies and gentlemen, the addendum is changing the terms and conditions of the contract. You might want to be specific about what's being changed. If your escrow officer and the lender get this and go, I'm confused, so was it 3% or is it now $1,500 or is it this plus that?
But if they put in all other conditions of the contract remain the same, isn't that still stating that separation or no?
It's our responsibility to clearly communicate.
Okay.
The contract and any and all addenda that are corporate are nothing more than instructions.
Sure.
So let's give clear instructions. The seller was given $5,000 in closing cost concessions. That's what we negotiated on the onset. Now we're asking for another $1,500. So seller to credit buyer an additional $1,500 for a total of $6,500. No reason not to be abundantly clear about that.
Okay.
other than sheer laziness. Anybody can understand my instructions, clearly communicated. Yeah? Okay. All right, so again, ladies and gentlemen, just to stress, because some agents forget this. When you send a BINSR on day 6 of your 10-day, what happens to the other 4 days?
Gone.
They're gone, never to return again. Now, if I'm a listing agent, I want that BINSR now. Yeah? Some people, agents, will do the inspection on day 3 and hold the BINSR until day 10. I hate you. Don't do that for the sake of just doing it. If you legit need the time, take the time. That's what you negotiated. And if there's something that warrants an extension of your due diligence period, great, communicate that, and we should accommodate, right? But don't hang on to the BINSR because you've got time. That's not showing good faith. That's showing, hey, I'm going to keep these days in case my buyers get cold feet or find a better deal, or it's just not bad. It's not good business. Okay? All right. Let's see. You know, guys, it really, if you just read the BINSR, or even maybe just read it to your client, it states, buyer has completed all desired inspection period items, such as, and it gives a list. You really want to communicate to your client, investigate everything that you think might be important to you. Got it? Okay, so let's run a hypothetical. I write up the BINSR for some items that are important to my client. I send it over today. Today's Monday. Yeah? Okay. How long does the seller have to respond? 5 days. So by like 11:59 p.m. what day? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So Sunday morning rolls around. It's Sunday 9 a.m. Client texts, hey, what did the seller say? And you haven't received anything in writing yet. What has the seller said?
Nothing needs to be repaired.
No. No.
Oh, on the other side. Sorry, go.
Seller's
Silence.
silence is deemed what? Disapproval of the items requested.
And it's the same way, the other way, isn't it, too? Like if the buyer does not send it in on time, then it's, we're not
Acceptance.
requesting any repairs, right?
Yeah. If your 10 days is up and you haven't submitted a BINSR, what is the buyer communicating per the contract?
There's nothing they're asking for.
It's deemed the buyer's acceptance of the premises and we're moving forward,
Yeah.
right? So let's say buyer submits BINSR asking for 5 items. Seller responds saying, well, we're going to fix item 1, 2, and 4. How long does the buyer have to respond to that?
3 days.
5. Unless something changed that I'm unaware of.
It's 10, 5, and 5 for a total of 20.
Now, what happens if buyer doesn't respond in writing?
Same thing.
It's deemed their approval of the seller's response. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, please read these things that you're advising your clients to sign. You might want to know what it says. Because it's all of like that. Really, because if you look, page 2 is not much more than just additional things, right? Or buyer's waiver and inspection. By the way, if your buyer's ever waived an inspection, you want them to sign that.
And a blank spot.
And a blank spot. And then page 3 is just simply seller's response and then buyer's selection after that. So all you got to read is a couple sentences on the first page. I know it's really difficult because, you know, you make so much money on a transaction that you don't have time to read half a page of writing. Okay. All right. The rest of it, guys, I mean, that's pretty much it. I just want you to understand what is due diligence, the time frames, how you ask for things. Again, I think that's the most important thing I want to communicate. Reference the inspection summary item, but then also in your own words, state what you're requesting from the seller. It's not just a statement, hey, that's broke. No. What do you want about it to the seller? Clear instructions. Seller shall replace or repair. Or be clear on exactly what you're asking for.
You know, on the item number, I also put like what photos go with it too. So that it, just to make
Typically
it
they're
clear.
referenced, but
Okay.
yeah, that's,
Just to make
you
sure.
can't state too much
Exactly,
if you're being clear.
exactly.
It's when we're not communicating enough of what you're asking for and it's left to interpretation or vague, ambiguous, and I don't know what to do with it. That's the problem. Yeah. Okay. What other questions or situations have you guys ran into where you've had some confusion around this process or issues that you'd like other people to know of?
I've got something I wanted to get clear, because in the contract, if you go into line 268, it mentions that if the buyer notice fails to specify items disapproved as allowed herein, cancellation will remain in effect, but the buyer has failed to comply with the provisions of this contract. Seller may deliver to the buyer a cure notice as required by this section of 7A. If the buyer fails to cure the non-compliance within the 3 days of delivery of such notice, then the buyer shall be in breach. And
You're talking about cures, though.
Yeah, but that's on the bottom part of the BINSR part, and so I don't know if I was just kind of relating the two, like if you don't send your BINSR on time, do they send a cure to, hey, you send it in, or it's
No,
just,
no, because the BINSR even states that if you don't send,
yeah,
what does that mean?
it just means that you're not asking for
Yeah,
anything.
so the timeframes on a BINSR not adhering to those have
Yeah.
nothing to do
Okay.
with a potential breach of the contract, and why?
Because the BINSR isn't part of the contract.
Exactly.
There you go, okay. Okay.
So cures do not apply to a BINSR.
Because it's not part of the contract.
Now, what may apply as a potential breach of contract is when there has been an agreement to do repairs, and you do a final walkthrough, and repairs were not completed.
Is that what it's stating? Is that what that
So that's where the
Okay.
pre-closing walkthrough with box number 2,
Okay.
that acts as a cure. That
That
we
always
did have an
confused the
agreement.
crap out of me, so, okay.
Yeah, but responding to timeframes with a BINSR is not a potential breach of contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That helps
Good
a lot.
question. What else?
So, I would like to reiterate how important it is to make sure that you're following the dates, because I remember a certain situation where we responded, I believe it was a day late, and fortunately, they responded to us on the BINSR, and then it did fall apart where my client decided not to follow through. What happened there? And then, what was it? Because there was like $5,000 at stake. She was not going to give us our earnest money back. And she was stating that we were late, therefore they got to keep the money. However, because they responded to us, like you said, we were in the right, we were okay.
So did you go over your 10 days, submit on day 11?
Yes.
But then the seller
Responding.
responding was deemed
Yes.
their acceptance and approval of that
Yes.
agreement.
Yes,
Therefore, kind of like waiving the whole,
yes.
you lost your opportunity
Yes.
because of the seller's actions. Yeah.
Yes, thank God.
So, actually, for those who don't know, the way I met Peggy was on a cross deal. And she submitted an offer. This is before the new contract. What the new contract states properties are as is. It didn't used to state that. So she wrote an additional terms, buyers buying it as is, yada, yada, yada. And then I get a BINSR. And I'm like, this, the nerve. So I'm calling her, I'm like, this is before my personal development. I'm like, why the, and she's like, well, it didn't hurt to ask. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point.
And he said,
I said that.
That's right.
You got a point there. You don't deserve it, you don't ask for it. So, okay. But we're still not fixing anything.
That's all right. I have to ask my buyer asked me that.
I thought, this crazy lady with a nerve. So anyways.
If I missed a BINSR date one time, I'll never, ever,
Yeah, I
ever,
know.
ever miss it
Tell
again.
me.
Right?
That's like losing
Ever.
a key to a listing. You'll never, ever, ever
Yeah.
do it again.
I've had people, like even on my own, on like flips, I've had an agent miss their time period and we still did what we were willing to do because it just
Good
feels
faith.
like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so here's the other thing, ladies and gentlemen. This wasn't intended part of the class, but let's say you're the listing agent and you get a BINSR with 20 items on it,
Yeah.
and you're like, we're canceling this. What must you do now that agents don't do, but you as an agent can get in a tremendous amount of trouble for? You know, because this isn't covered on E&O.
Does that the same?
It's called fraud or misrepresentation. When you have a deal that falls apart because of an inspection, what are you now to advise your clients to do as the seller?
Oh, to disclose.
Disclose
Everything.
what new material matters have been found.
And if they do repairs, then they update the BINSR
Yeah.
saying,
The spuds.
I mean, I'm sorry, the
So-
spuds of what they've done.
Yeah.
So you've got a listing, you get under contract, buyer does an inspection and says, hey, this place is about ready to fall to the ground. And you're like, well, we're not fixing anything, so they cancel. Here's what you must do as a listing agent. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we now must update the spuds because you have more information now that you didn't know before. So here's the best way to do that to protect you and your client. You know on the last page of the spuds where there's a space in the midsection of the last page? For the seller to update spuds. See attached inspection report as informational purposes completed on X date as Exhibit A. Then on the page 1 of the inspection, you write Exhibit A and attach. So now you give the new buyer spuds with Exhibit A. Here you go. This is the extent of our knowledge. What that inspector said. But we have not further investigated any of that. Got it? Please do that. So if your seller says, I'm not fixing anything, whatever the reason is, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you have the right to do that. However, you are now obligated to disclose all of that information to the next buyer. Is that going to help us in getting a higher price? No. So is it worth $1,000 to make this go away? It's all about perspective, isn't it? I hope you learned that lesson the easy way called right now in this class, and it doesn't cost you money later because you forgot. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes, this has happened many times for me in the past, sometimes it is cheaper to make this problem go away than it is to put it back in the market with this new information. Know what I mean? Okay. I want to keep this simple, clear, concise. Are there any other questions you guys have?
One about home inspections.
Yeah.
My last transaction, it was stated that sometimes it's good to have a licensed contractor to do the home inspection versus home inspector. I just wanted, that was the first time I've ever heard that. I know I'm still fresh.
That's the first time I've heard that too, and I've been doing this almost 18 years. I disagree with that, and here's why. The home inspector is a licensed professional in doing what?
Inspecting.
Inspecting. So they must know code, they must know all these things, and they're putting their license on the line if they miss something in the inspection. Whereas a contractor can go, yeah, I noticed that, but it wasn't a big deal because that's a $2.50 fix. But by them not saying anything, and it didn't go, you know, it didn't get resolved, it didn't get fixed, and now it's a $10,000 problem, is the contractor who did the inspection for you liable for that? No.
I think as an inspector, don't they have a certain number of checkpoints that they have to by state law in order for it to be a completed inspection as well?
I'm not actually able to answer that accurately, but the bottom line is they've got to go through training, continuing education to get a license to do this. Therefore, they're liable for their errors and omissions too.
And like us, we're held to a standard of realtors. They have a association that they adhere to specific rules.
Yeah.
Do you know there's inspectors out there that are not licensed?
Yes.
Oh.
So just because they're a home inspector doesn't mean they're licensed. So before you start using a new person, you may want to ask them, are you a licensed home inspector, or do you just charge to inspect? Right? Because are there real estate agents that are not realtors?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
They don't belong to the association.
They don't belong to the National Association of Realtors, hence they're not able to use the word Realtor. By the way, just to remind you, it is Realtor. Realtor.
Not real life.
Not realtor, I hear all kinds of weird things. I don't even want to start saying them. I don't want to develop any bad habit. Think of it. And, you know, this is how I remembered it. Like, it sounds weird. Realtor. Not realtor, There's no I. Or A over here somewhere. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Good questions, guys. Thank you. Yeah? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.